Guilt does not begin where most women think it does. It does not begin with selfishness. It does not begin with wrongdoing. It does not even begin with choice. It begins with conditioning. Jung understood guilt as a psychological signal, not a moral verdict, a signal that the psyche is moving away from an internalized order. For many women, this internal order was formed early. Be considerate. Be accommodating. Be available. Do not disrupt harmony. These messages were rarely spoken outright. They were absorbed through tone, through reward, through withdrawal of affection. The young girl learned quickly that connection depended on compliance. Choosing herself felt risky, so she learned to postpone herself. This postponement became automatic. By adulthood, guilt no longer required an external trigger. It arose internally. The moment she rested, the moment she said no, the moment she prioritized her own needs. Jung would say, this guilt does not belong to the present. It belongs to an earlier psychic contract, a contract the ego did not consciously sign, but faithfully obeyed. When a woman begins to individuate, this contract is challenged. She starts to act from inner truth, rather than expectation, and guilt appears, not as punishment, but as resistance. The psyche resists the loss of a familiar structure, even when that structure was limiting. Guilt is the guardian of the old order. This is why guilt often intensifies. Precisely when a woman is doing something right for herself, she rests and feels guilty. She succeeds and feels guilty. She sets boundaries and feels guilty. Jung understood this paradox deeply. The psyche clings to what once ensured belonging, even when it no longer serves growth. Many women misinterpret guilt as evidence they are harming others, but often guilt simply means they are no longer abandoning themselves. This distinction is crucial. True guilt arises from violating one's values. Neurotic guilt arises from violating expectations. Jung warned that confusing the two leads to chronic self-betrayal. As the woman begins to question her guilt, she may feel fear beneath it. Fear of rejection, fear of being seen as difficult, fear of losing love. But individuation always carries this risk, not because love disappears, but because conditional love is exposed. The woman may discover that some relationships depended on her self-neglect. This discovery hurts, but it also clarifies. Jung believed clarity, though painful, is always liberating. As the woman tolerates guilt without obeying it, something shifts. The guilt loses intensity, not immediately, but gradually, because the psyche learns that survival is not threatened. She is still here. She is still connected. She is still whole. This is how guilt transforms from command to information. It becomes a signal that says, you are crossing an old boundary. Not a warning to stop, but an invitation to integrate. The woman learns to ask, is this guilt aligned with my values, or with my conditioning? This question is revolutionary. It returns authority inward. Jung believed that maturity begins when the ego no longer confuses obedience with goodness. As this authority stabilizes, the woman's choices become cleaner. She may still feel guilt, but she no longer lets it decide for her. This is not cruelty. It is psychological adulthood. And adulthood, for Jung, meant living from the self, rather than from inherited rules. As the woman begins to recognize that her guilt is not a moral compass, but a psychological inheritance, another layer reveals itself: love. For many women, guilt and love became intertwined early, not because love is meant to hurt, but because love was conditional. Affection arrived when she was helpful. Approval followed when she was accommodating. Closeness was maintained when she was agreeable. Jung understood that the psyche associates repeated experiences with meaning. Over time, the young girl internalized a quiet equation. Love equals self-adjustment. This equation did not feel oppressive at first. It felt like safety. It offered belonging. But safety based on self-erasure comes at a cost. As the woman grows older, this cost appears as guilt whenever she chooses herself, because choosing herself feels like choosing separation. Jung believed that the fear beneath guilt is often the fear of losing the bond, not just with others, but with an internalized image of love. This is why guilt can feel so intense. It threatens connection at a psychic level. When a woman rests instead of helping, says no instead of accommodating, or prioritizes her inner needs, the psyche reacts as if attachment is at risk. This reaction is not irrational. It is learned. The nervous system remembers a time when withdrawal of love had consequences. Even if those consequences are no longer present, the body reacts as if they are. Jung emphasized that the psyche is conservative. It protects what once ensured survival, even if that protection is outdated. As the woman becomes aware of this dynamic, she may feel sadness for the parts of herself that learned love through self-sacrifice. This grief is necessary. It honors the adaptation. Jung would never suggest rejecting these patterns harshly. He believed that compassion toward one's own psyche is essential for integration. The woman begins to see that her guilt was not weakness. It was loyalty. Loyalty to a system that once kept her connected. Recognizing this changes everything. Instead of fighting guilt, she starts to listen to it. What is it protecting? What does it fear? Often, the answer is simple. Disconnection, abandonment, loss of love. But individuation requires a painful truth. Not all love can survive authenticity. Jung understood that real connection cannot be built on unconscious contracts. If a relationship requires self-denial to continue, it is not intimacy. It is dependency. As the woman allows herself to choose differently, she tests reality. She rests, and the world does not collapse. She sets boundaries, and some people remain. She prioritizes herself, and life continues. These experiences slowly retrain the psyche. The nervous system learns that self-choice does not equal abandonment. This learning takes time. The guilt does not disappear overnight, but its authority weakens. The woman may still feel guilt, but she no longer obeys it automatically. This is a profound shift. Jung believed that freedom is not the absence of inner conflict, but the ability to choose consciously within it. As the woman practices choosing herself gently, she begins to notice something unexpected. Her capacity for love increases, not diminishes, because love is no longer resentful. She gives from fullness rather than obligation. This kind of love feels different. It is calmer, more grounded, less anxious. It does not require constant reassurance. The woman begins to recognize that self-respect strengthens connection. People respond differently to her presence. Some step up, some step away. Both responses are information. Jung emphasized that individuation clarifies reality. It reveals who can meet us, and who relied on our self-neglect. This clarity can be painful, but it is also freeing. The woman no longer has to guess why she feels drained in certain relationships. She sees the pattern, and she chooses differently. Choosing differently does not mean rejecting care. It means redefining it. Care now includes herself. This inclusion is revolutionary, because for many women, self-care was never modeled as legitimate. It was framed as indulgence, as selfishness, as something to be earned. Jung understood that when care is conditional, the psyche internalizes scarcity. There is never enough time, rest, or attention. By choosing herself, the woman challenges this scarcity. She begins to experience abundance internally, not material abundance, emotional abundance. She has enough presence for herself and for others. This abundance quiets guilt. Guilt thrives in scarcity. When the psyche feels resourced, Guilt loses leverage. As the woman continues this process, her inner dialogue changes. She no longer asks, "Is this selfish?" She asks, "Is this aligned?" Alignment replaces morality. Jung believed that morality imposed from outside eventually collapses. Only inner values sustain integrity. The woman develops her own value system, one that includes care, but not self-erasure, one that includes love, but not martyrdom. This system is not rigid. It evolves, but it is hers. This ownership marks psychological adulthood. She no longer needs permission to exist fully, and guilt, once a constant companion, becomes an occasional visitor. It still appears, but it no longer rules. As the woman moves deeper into this process, another truth quietly surfaces. Guilt is not only emotional, it is somatic. Jung observed that unresolved psychic conflicts do not remain in the mind alone. They descend into the body. For many women, guilt lives in the shoulders, in the jaw, in the stomach. It appears as chronic tension, persistent fatigue, a sense of carrying invisible weight. This weight is rarely questioned. It feels normal. The woman may say she is tired, but she does not yet see what she is carrying. What she is carrying are unspoken obligations, internal commands that never rest. Be available. Be kind. Be patient. Be understanding. Do not disappoint. These commands operate below consciousness. They do not shout. They whisper. And because they whisper, they feel like truth. Jung believed that what feels unquestionable is often the most unconscious. The body obeys these commands long before the mind reflects on them. This is why rest can feel uncomfortable. Stillness removes distraction, and without distraction, the guilt surfaces. The woman lies down, and suddenly feels restless. Thoughts appear. You should be doing something. Someone might need you. You are wasting time. These thoughts are not random. They are internalized voices, often inherited. Jung spoke extensively about the collective unconscious, but he also emphasized the personal unconscious, the psychic material absorbed from caregivers, culture, and unspoken expectations. Many women carry the emotional residue of generations who survived by self-denial, mothers who endured, grandmothers who sacrificed, women whose worth was measured by usefulness. This lineage lives in the psyche, not as memory, but as attitude. The woman may feel guilt, even when no one is asking anything of her. This is inherited obligation, not chosen. Jung believed that individuation requires distinguishing what belongs to the self from what belongs to history. This distinction is not intellectual. It is experiential. The woman begins to ask herself, is this truly mine? Is this value alive in me? Or is it a remnant? This questioning is destabilizing because it challenges identity. For many women, being good became central to who they are. Good daughter, good partner, good mother, good employee. But Jung warned that the persona, the social mask, can consume the psyche if mistaken for the self. When goodness becomes compulsory, it ceases to be authentic. It becomes performance, and performance is exhausting. The woman may notice that her fatigue does not disappear with sleep, because it is not physical exhaustion. It is moral exhaustion, the burden of constant self-monitoring. Am I doing enough? Am I being fair? Am I neglecting someone? This vigilance is not love. It is fear. Fear of disapproval. Fear of rejection. Fear of being seen as selfish. Jung understood fear as a signal, not an enemy. Fear points to attachment. The woman begins to see what she is attached to. Approval, harmony, being needed. These attachments once ensured safety, but they now limit vitality. As awareness deepens, the woman may feel anger. Anger at the expectations placed upon her. Anger at the silence around her needs. Anger at how normalized her depletion became. This anger often scares her, because anger contradicts the persona. She may judge it as unfeminine, as dangerous, as destructive. Jung saw anger differently. He viewed it as psychic energy that has been suppressed. Not evil, but compressed. When anger is denied expression, it turns inward. It becomes depression, anxiety, self-blame. Guilt often masks anger. The woman feels guilty instead of angry, because anger threatens connection. Guilt preserves it. Understanding this reverses the inner dynamic. The woman begins to allow herself to feel irritation without immediately neutralizing it. She notices when she is overgiving. She notices resentment. These emotions are not signs of failure. They are signs of boundary awareness emerging. Jung believed that boundaries are psychological achievements. They are not selfish constructs. They define the self. Without boundaries, there is no individuation. As the woman practices honoring small boundaries, something shifts in her body. The shoulders drop slightly. The breath deepens. This is not coincidence. The nervous system responds to congruence. When inner truth aligns with outer action, the body relaxes. This relaxation feels unfamiliar, because tension was normalized. Calm may even feel suspicious at first. The psyche asks, "What am I forgetting? Who am I neglecting?" But slowly, with repetition, calm becomes safe. Jung emphasized repetition. Insight alone is not enough. The unconscious learns through experience. Each time the woman chooses rest, and nothing catastrophic happens, the psyche updates. Each time she says no, and survives the discomfort, the internal threat diminishes. This is how guilt dissolves. Not through argument, but through evidence. The woman's relationships begin to reorganize. Some people respond with respect. Others push back. Resistance is revealing. It shows where the old contract existed. Jung believed that conflict is clarifying. It reveals unconscious agreements. When the woman stops fulfilling a role, those invested in that role react. This reaction is not her responsibility, but it is information. She learns who related to her as a self, and who related to her as a function. This differentiation is painful, but it is necessary, because individuation costs illusions. The illusion that love requires sacrifice. The illusion that harmony requires silence. The illusion that worth depends on endurance. As these illusions fall away, the woman may experience grief again. Grief for relationships that cannot evolve. Grief for the version of herself that tried so hard. Jung honored grief. He saw it as a threshold emotion. Grief marks transition. It means something old has died, but something new has not yet fully formed. This in-between is uncomfortable. The woman may feel unanchored, less certain, more alone. But this solitude is different from abandonment. It is spacious. It allows her to hear herself. In this space, a quieter voice emerges. Not the voice of obligation, not the voice of fear, but the voice of the self. This voice does not demand. It guides. It asks, "What do you need now? What feels true? What nourishes you?" At first, the woman may not know how to answer. She was never asked. But slowly, through attention, she learns. And each answer strengthens her inner authority. Guilt loses its power when authority shifts inward, because guilt relies on external judgment. When the self becomes the reference point, the psyche reorganizes. The woman no longer needs to justify her existence. She lives it. As this inner authority strengthens, another layer begins to reveal itself. Desire. Not desire as fantasy, but desire as psychic direction. Jung believed that the psyche moves toward wholeness through attraction and aversion. What draws you, and what repels you? are not accidents. They are signals from the unconscious about what wants to live through you. For many women, desire was never trusted. It was corrected, redirected, moralized, delayed. Desire became something dangerous, or childish, or selfish, so it was replaced with duty. And over time, the woman forgot how to recognize desire. Without guilt, she learned to ask, "What is expected of me?" instead of, "What is alive in me?" This disconnection does not happen suddenly. It happens subtly, through praise for self-sacrifice, through reward for compliance, through love that is conditional. Jung warned that when desire is ignored, it does not disappear. It goes underground. And what goes underground does not stay quiet. It expresses itself indirectly, through restlessness, through dissatisfaction without clear reason, through longing that feels vague and unnameable. The woman may say she has everything she wanted, yet something feels missing. This absence is not ingratitude. It is unlived life. Jung believed that neurosis is often the result of avoided destiny. Not destiny as fate, but destiny as inner calling. The psyche knows when something essential has been postponed too long. The woman may feel bored with her own life. This boredom is often judged harshly, but Jung saw boredom as the soul's protest, a signal that vitality is being suppressed. When desire begins to re-emerge, it rarely arrives politely. It may come as frustration, as envy, as sudden attraction to something irrational, a different path, a forbidden interest, a creative impulse that makes no sense. The woman may try to suppress it again. She tells herself, "This is unrealistic. This is irresponsible. This is not who I am." But Jung would ask a different question. Who decided who you are allowed to be? The unconscious does not negotiate with social approval. It moves according to necessity. If ignored long enough, desire intensifies. It becomes obsession or despair. This is not punishment. It is compensation. Jung's principle of compensation explains this clearly. When consciousness leans too far in one direction, the unconscious pushes back. If a woman lives entirely for others, the unconscious will pull her toward herself, sometimes violently. This is why midlife crises often occur. Not because time is running out, but because the psyche refuses further postponement. The woman may suddenly feel the urge to change everything: relationships, work, identity. This urge is frightening, but it is also honest. The psyche is demanding attention, not destruction, but realignment. Jung emphasized that not every desire should be acted upon literally, but every desire must be listened to symbolically. What does this longing represent? Freedom, expression, autonomy, depth. When the woman learns to interpret desire, rather than suppress it, she regains orientation. Desire becomes guidance, not impulse. This shift is crucial, because without desire, life becomes mechanical. The woman performs roles, but feels absent, present, but not alive. As desire is acknowledged, energy returns, creativity awakens. This may express itself through art, through learning, through movement, through voice. The woman may feel awkward at first, unskilled, exposed. This discomfort is normal. She is no longer hiding behind competence. She is becoming. Jung believed that becoming always feels like disintegration at first, because old structures loosen, certainty dissolves, but something more authentic forms beneath. As desire integrates, relationships change again. The woman becomes less predictable. She no longer exists solely to stabilize others. This can be unsettling for those around her. Some may accuse her of changing. They are right. But change is not betrayal. It is development. Jung stated that refusing development is one of the greatest sources of suffering. because life itself is developmental. To stagnate psychologically is to oppose nature. As the woman aligns with desire, she also encounters fear again. Fear of being seen, fear of being judged, fear of losing belonging. These fears are real. Individuation is not safe, but it is meaningful, and meaning sustains where safety cannot. Jung believed that a meaningful life can endure almost any hardship, but a meaningless life collapses. Even in comfort, the woman begins to choose meaning, not dramatically, not loudly, but consistently. She notices where her energy increases. She follows that. She notices where her body contracts. She questions that. Slowly, her life becomes less reactive, more intentional, not controlled, but aligned. This alignment creates a quiet confidence, not arrogance, groundedness. She no longer needs to prove her worth. She experiences it internally, and this internal validation changes how she relates to love. Love is no longer a transaction, no longer a reward for endurance. Love becomes a meeting between two selves. Jung believed that mature love is impossible without individuation, because without a self, there can only be fusion or dependency. As the woman individuates, she becomes capable of intimacy. Without self-erasure, she can remain herself, while being connected. This is not learned through theory. It is learned through lived boundary, through saying no, and staying present, through allowing disappointment, without collapsing, through choosing truth over approval. This capacity reshapes her inner world. Anxiety decreases, because she is no longer divided. Depression softens, because energy is no longer trapped. The psyche relaxes, when it no longer has to fight itself. Jung called this inner peace, the reconciliation of opposites, not perfection. Integration. The woman is no longer trying to be only light. She accepts her shadow, her anger, her desire, her refusal. These aspects no longer scare her. They inform her. The shadow becomes ally, instead of saboteur. And with this integration, the woman stands differently in life. Not above others, not below, but rooted, aware, present. As intuition begins to reclaim its place, the woman notices something subtle but profound. She no longer reacts as quickly. There is a pause between stimulus and response. A space opens. Jung understood this pause as the birthplace of consciousness. Before, reaction was automatic, conditioned, predictable. Now, the psyche hesitates, not out of fear, but out of listening. This listening is not passive. It is alert. The woman senses beneath the surface of words, situations, and expectations. She notices tone more than content, energy more than intention. This is intuition returning to consciousness. For centuries, intuition in women was tolerated only when it served others. Caregiving intuition, emotional anticipation, relational sensitivity. But intuition as authority was discouraged, because intuition does not ask permission. It knows. Jung classified intuition as one of the primary psychological functions, not mystical, but perceptive. Intuition perceives patterns before they fully form. This is why intuitive women are often told they are overthinking. They are not. They are perceiving early. But early perception threatens systems built on denial. As intuition strengthens, the woman begins to trust her initial sensations. The subtle tightening in the chest, the unexplained heaviness in a conversation, the quiet pull toward a certain direction. Before, she would override these signals. She would rationalize, give the benefit of the doubt, assume responsibility. Now, she stays with the sensation. She asks, "What am I noticing?" Not, "What should I think?" Jung believed that intuition is the bridge between the conscious mind and the deeper layers of the psyche. When intuition is ignored, the unconscious compensates through symptoms, anxiety, nightmares, sudden emotional overwhelm. These are not malfunctions. They are messages that were not heard earlier. As the woman listens sooner, the psyche does not need to shout. This reduces inner chaos. She begins to feel guided from within, rather than pushed from without. This inner guidance does not promise certainty, but it offers coherence. Her choices begin to align across emotional, physical, and symbolic levels. She feels less fragmented. Jung emphasized that fragmentation is one of the core sources of suffering. When parts of the psyche are split off or ignored, they act independently. Integration restores dialogue. The woman now dialogues with herself. She notices conflicting impulses without immediately suppressing one. She can hold, "I want closeness," and "I need space." "I feel compassion," and "I feel anger." Before, she would choose the socially acceptable option. Now, she allows complexity. This is psychological maturity. Not clarity through simplification, but clarity through capacity. Her nervous system adapts. It becomes more flexible, less reactive. This flexibility changes how she experiences stress. Stress no longer means collapse. It becomes information, a signal that something needs adjustment. Jung believed that adaptation is the psyche's fundamental task, not endurance. Adaptation. As the woman adapts internally, external circumstances reorganize. Not magically, but relationally. She stops over-explaining, because she trusts her perception. She stops chasing closure, because she recognizes when something is complete. She stops pursuing unavailable people, because her intuition senses absence early. This creates a new emotional economy. She conserves energy. Energy becomes precious when it is no longer wasted on self-betrayal. With conserved energy, another layer emerges. Joy. Not excitement. Not stimulation. Joy as quiet vitality. A sense of being aligned with one's own life. Jung described joy as a byproduct of individuation, not the goal. When the psyche moves toward wholeness, joy appears naturally. The woman may notice moments of contentment without external cause. Walking, breathing, existing. This simplicity feels unfamiliar, because she was taught that worth must be earned. But joy does not negotiate. It arrives when resistance softens. As joy becomes accessible, the woman's relationship to productivity changes. She no longer equates busyness with value. She notices when activity becomes avoidance. This awareness disrupts cultural conditioning, especially for women, whose value was tied to contribution. Jung warned that modern life overvalues doing and undervalues being. This imbalance creates neurosis. The woman begins to reclaim being. She allows emptiness, not as absence, but as space. Space for imagination. Space for reflection. Space for unconscious material to surface gently. Dreams may intensify. Symbols appear. Water, doors, animals, unknown landscapes. Jung viewed dreams as direct communications from the unconscious. As the woman becomes more receptive, dreams become clearer. Not always pleasant, but meaningful. She learns to listen symbolically, not literally. A dream of being lost may not mean confusion. It may mean exploration. A dream of conflict may not mean danger. It may mean integration. The woman begins to understand that her psyche is intelligent. It is not sabotaging her. It is guiding her. This trust transforms her inner relationship. She stops trying to control herself. She collaborates. This collaboration reduces inner violence. Self-criticism softens. Perfectionism loosens. Because perfectionism is not ambition. It is fear. Fear of rejection. As fear decreases, authenticity increases. The woman speaks more slowly, chooses words more carefully, not to please, but to be precise. She becomes less dramatic, because drama was compensating for unheard truth. When truth is spoken calmly, drama is unnecessary. This calm presence affects others. Some feel safe, some feel exposed. Her clarity acts as a mirror. Not everyone welcomes mirrors. Jung understood projection deeply. When people react strongly to someone's authenticity, it often touches disowned parts of themselves. The woman learns not to personalize reactions. She observes them. This observation protects her energy. She no longer absorbs emotional debris. She recognizes what belongs to her and what does not. This differentiation is subtle, but powerful. It marks the emergence of psychological sovereignty. The woman governs her inner world, not rigidly, responsively. With sovereignty, choices feel cleaner. She may choose solitude, without loneliness, connection, without fusion, work, without self-exploitation, love, without self-abandonment. These balances are not static. They require ongoing awareness. But awareness is now established. Jung believed that once consciousness expands, it cannot fully contract. The woman cannot unknow what she has integrated. She may revisit old patterns, but she recognizes them sooner. This reduces suffering duration. Recovery becomes faster. Self-trust strengthens. As self-trust solidifies, the woman's sense of time changes. She feels less rushed, because urgency often comes from misalignment. When aligned, there is patience, not passivity. Patience rooted in trust. That movement is occurring internally. This internal movement is subtle, but it is constant. The psyche reorganizes, long before circumstances shift. Jung emphasized that outer change lags behind inner change. Those who understand this do not despair during transition. They listen. They wait. They adjust. The woman learns to honor thresholds, moments when nothing seems to move. These are incubation phases. Necessary. Life is not linear. It is rhythmic. Expansion, contraction, integration. As she respects these rhythms, burnout becomes less likely. Because burnout is not caused by effort alone. It is caused by effort without meaning. Meaning now guides effort. The woman no longer says yes automatically. She feels into resonance. This discernment protects her vitality. Vitality becomes her compass. Not morality imposed from outside, but ethics emerging from alignment. Jung believed that true ethics arise from individuation, not from rules, from responsibility to the self. This responsibility does not isolate. It deepens contribution. Because when a woman is aligned, what she offers is genuine, not resentful, not depleted. Her presence carries integrity. Integrity is felt. It cannot be faked. Others may not articulate it, but they respond. Trust increases. Boundaries are respected, not because she enforces them aggressively, but because she inhabits them naturally. This natural boundary setting feels different. It is quiet, firm, non-defensive. The woman no longer needs to justify. Justification implies doubt. She acts from certainty, not arrogance. Inner certainty. This certainty is flexible. It can adjust without collapsing. That is its strength. As vocation begins to surface, it rarely announces itself as a clear plan. It appears first as attention, a sense that something essential is asking to be lived, even if its form is still unclear. Jung did not define vocation as career. He defined it as an inner necessity, a demand from the self that seeks expression through the personality. For many women, this demand was delayed, not because it was weak, but because other demands were louder. Family roles, relational obligations, Cultural expectations. The woman learned to prioritize survival over calling. This was not failure. It was adaptation. But adaptation has a lifespan. When the psyche matures, it begins to ask a different question. What is trying to emerge through me? This question destabilizes familiar structures. Because vocation often contradicts convenience. It may require solitude, risk, disapproval, reorganization of life. The woman may feel fear, not because the calling is wrong, but because it threatens identity. Identity was built to belong. Calling is built to become. Jung warned that when vocation is ignored, the psyche compensates with depression. Not sadness, but a loss of vitality, a sense that life is happening elsewhere. The woman may feel like an observer of her own existence, present but disengaged. This disengagement is not laziness. It is misalignment. When vocation begins to press forward, the woman may try to minimize it. She may tell herself, "Others need me more. It's too late. It's unrealistic. It's selfish." These thoughts are protective mechanisms. They shield the ego from the anxiety of transformation. But the self persists. It does not argue. It repeats. Through longing, through restlessness, through dissatisfaction that no achievement resolves. Jung believed that vocation is not chosen. It chooses. And the task of the ego is not to invent meaning, but to respond to it. This response does not require immediate action. It requires honesty. The woman must first admit to herself what calls her. This admission is often private, fragile. She may feel foolish, ashamed, because desire without permission feels dangerous. But acknowledgement shifts energy. What was unconscious becomes conscious, and what becomes conscious can be negotiated with. The woman begins to explore, not necessarily outwardly. Internally, she allows curiosity. She reads, reflects, imagines. Imagination, for Jung, was not fantasy. It was dialogue with the unconscious. Through imagination, the psyche reveals symbolic direction. Images arise. Themes repeat. The woman notices what consistently moves her. This noticing creates coherence. She begins to sense a thread, not a map. A direction. Direction is enough. Action follows later. Premature action often collapses. Jung emphasized timing. Psychological timing. Acting before integration leads to burnout. The woman learns to respect gestation. She allows the calling to mature within. This patience is difficult, especially in a culture obsessed with visibility. But inner work is invisible by nature. Its results are not immediate. They are structural. As vocation integrates, the woman's values clarify. She may outgrow certain environments, not because they are wrong, but because they are no longer aligned. This creates grief. Leaving familiar identities feels like loss. Jung acknowledged grief as an unavoidable companion of individuation. You cannot become without leaving something behind. The woman may grieve versions of herself. The agreeable one, the endlessly available one, the one who survived by shrinking. This grief is tender. It deserves respect, not dismissal. Grieving does not mean regret. It means honoring what once protected you. As grief integrates, resentment dissolves. Because resentment often masks unacknowledged grief. The woman stops blaming others for not seeing her. She realizes she did not see herself fully either. This realization is not self-accusation. It is liberation. Responsibility returns inward. With responsibility comes power, not control. Agency. She becomes an agent of her own becoming. This agency feels grounded, not frantic. The woman no longer seeks permission. She seeks alignment. Alignment becomes her internal metric. Does this expand me, or contract me? Does this deepen me, or drain me? These questions guide decisions. They simplify complexity, not by reducing options, but by clarifying criteria. Jung believed that clarity emerges when values are integrated, not imposed. As values stabilize, external validation loses its grip. Praise becomes pleasant, but not necessary. Criticism becomes information, not threat. The woman's nervous system reflects this shift. Less hypervigilance, more presence. She can stay in her body during conflict. This embodiment is crucial. Disembodiment is often a trauma response. Returning to the body signals safety. The woman feels her feet, her breath, her weight. She occupies space differently. This occupation is subtle, but unmistakable. Others sense it. Some feel drawn. Some feel challenged. The woman does not manage reactions. She allows them. Allowance is strength, not passivity. It indicates trust in one center. As trust deepens, the woman's relationship with time changes further. She stops racing toward future fulfillment. She inhabits process. Jung emphasized that the self unfolds over a lifetime. There is no final arrival, only deeper alignment. This understanding relieves pressure. Life becomes less about milestones and more about meaning. Meaning reveals itself in how one lives, not what one achieves. The woman notices meaning in ordinary moments. Conversation, creation, stillness. This presence creates richness, not excitement. Depth. Depth sustains. As depth increases, the woman becomes less susceptible to external chaos. She stays informed without becoming overwhelmed. She feels compassion without absorbing suffering. This boundary is not cold. It is necessary. Jung warned that empathy without boundaries leads to psychic inflation or collapse. The woman learns to care wisely. She cannot save everyone, nor is that her task. Her task is to live truthfully. Truth radiates. It influences without force. This influence is quiet, but enduring. The woman becomes an example, not deliberately, by embodiment. Others may say, "You seem different." She is, not because she changed who she is, but because she stopped suppressing it. This authenticity stabilizes identity. Identity is no longer reactive. It is rooted. Rooted identity can evolve without disintegrating. This is psychological resilience, not toughness. Flex increment by coherence. The woman trusts herself to handle uncertainty because she knows she will listen. This listening is her anchor. Life continues to present challenges. Individuation does not remove difficulty. It changes relationship to it. Challenges become dialogues. What is this asking of me? Not, why is this happening to me? This shift transforms suffering. Suffering becomes instructive, rather than meaningless. Jung believed that suffering is unavoidable, but meaningless suffering is optional. Meaning emerges when suffering is integrated into growth. The woman integrates again and again. Integration is ongoing, not a destination. The psyche breathes, contracts, expands. She moves with it, not against. This cooperation reduces inner conflict. Energy flows. Creativity deepens. The woman creates, not to prove worth, but to express being. Expression becomes nourishment. She feels fed by what she gives. This reciprocity is vital. Giving without nourishment leads to depletion. Now, giving replenishes, because it comes from alignment. The woman recognizes when to stop. Rest is no longer guilt-laden. It is intelligent. Rest integrates experience. Without rest, growth fragments. Jung emphasized rhythm, work and rest, engagement and withdrawal. The woman honors rhythm. She no longer forces productivity. She trusts cycles. This trust stabilizes mental health. Anxiety decreases, because anxiety often arises from resisting natural cycles. The woman no longer fights ebb. She knows flow will return. This knowledge is embodied, not conceptual. Embodied knowledge cannot be easily shaken. It becomes a quiet confidence, a calm center. From this center, the woman lives, and life responds. Not always kindly, but honestly. Honesty is enough, because honesty allows response. The woman is no longer waiting for life to start. It is happening here, through her. As this lived alignment deepens, the woman begins to encounter a subtler challenge. Silence. Not external silence, but the internal kind. The absence of urgency. The quiet after old patterns loosen. The space where familiar anxieties once lived. At first, this silence feels unsettling, because chaos, even painful chaos, was familiar. Jung observed that many people mistake inner noise for vitality. They confuse tension with aliveness. When the psyche reorganizes, the noise subsides, and what remains can feel empty. This emptiness is often misunderstood. The woman may fear she is losing motivation, losing passion, losing drive. But Jung would say, this is not loss. This is neutrality, a return to baseline. The nervous system is no longer constantly activated. The psyche is no longer compensating. This neutrality is fertile, but only if it is tolerated. If the woman rushes to fill the silence, old patterns reassert themselves. Distraction, overcommitment, drama. The psyche tests. Can you remain here without creating urgency? This is a crucial threshold. Remaining in this quiet requires trust. Trust that meaning does not require noise. Trust that identity does not require struggle. Jung believed that the self often emerges in moments of stillness, not revelation, but recognition. The woman begins to notice what persists in silence. Certain values, certain images, certain longings that do not fade. These persistent elements are not moods. They are structures. They form the backbone of her emerging identity. She no longer defines herself by what she resists. She defines herself by what remains. This shift is subtle but decisive. Before, her sense of self was shaped by opposition. What she would never tolerate again. What she refused to repeat. Now, it is shaped by attraction. What she consistently returns to. What nourishes without exhausting. What deepens without consuming. This attraction is not impulsive. It is calm. The woman notices that certain activities leave her feeling whole rather than depleted. Certain conversations feel grounding rather than draining. Certain forms of solitude feel rich rather than lonely. Jung called this discrimination, a sign of maturity. The psyche learns to differentiate nourishment from stimulation. Stimulation excites but empties. Nourishment sustains. As this discrimination strengthens, the woman becomes less reactive to external pressures. Trends lose influence. Opinions soften their grip. She is no longer pulled by comparison. Comparison fades when inner orientation is established. Jung saw comparison as a symptom of lost direction. When the inner compass is clear, external reference points become secondary. This does not isolate the woman. It centers her. From this center, she engages differently. She listens more than she speaks, not because she lacks voice, but because she values resonance. When she speaks, her words carry weight, because they are not compulsive. They emerge from clarity. This clarity affects her emotional boundaries. She no longer feels obligated to process everyone else's emotions. Empathy becomes selective, not withdrawn, discerning. She can witness pain without absorbing it. This is not indifference. It is containment. Jung emphasized containment as essential for psychological health. Without containment, the psyche floods. With containment, emotion becomes information. The woman's emotional life stabilizes. Not flat, balanced. She still feels deeply, but feelings move. They do not linger unnecessarily. This movement prevents stagnation. Stagnation breeds resentment. Flow dissolves it. The woman becomes aware of how often she once stayed too long in situations that had ended psychologically. Jobs, relationships, roles. Now, she recognizes endings sooner. This does not make her cold. It makes her honest. Endings are not failures. They are completions. Jung believed that resisting endings creates neurosis. The psyche knows when something has fulfilled its function. Honoring endings creates space. Space invites the unknown. The unknown no longer terrifies her, because she trusts her capacity to respond. She does not need certainty. She needs presence. Presence allows adaptation. Adaptation sustains life. The woman notices that fear still appears, but it is no longer dominant. Fear becomes a signal, not a commander. She asks, "What is this fear protecting?" Often, fear protects identity, an identity that is outdated. She listens without obeying. This is courage, not the absence of fear, but the refusal to be ruled by it. Jung associated courage with loyalty to the self, not to ideals, not to expectations, to inner truth. This loyalty is tested, especially in relationships. As the woman becomes more herself, some connections weaken. They were sustained by her adaptation. Without that adaptation, the bond loses tension. This loss can be painful, but Jung warned against confusing familiarity with authenticity. Not every relationship is meant to survive individuation. Some were transitional. Acknowledging this prevents unnecessary self-blame. The woman learns to release without hostility, release without justification. This emotional cleanliness frees enormous energy. Energy returns to creativity, not necessarily artistic creativity, but life creativity, the ability to respond freshly. She becomes less repetitive, because repetition often arises from unresolved unconscious material. As integration progresses, repetition loses its function. Life feels less cyclical and more spiral. Similar themes may return, but at a different level. With more choice, more awareness, the woman experiences herself as evolving, not stuck. This sense of evolution creates hope, not hope as optimism, but hope as trust in process. Jung believed that hope emerges when the psyche experiences itself as meaningful. Meaning stabilizes. Even when circumstances fluctuate, the woman's inner narrative changes. She no longer frames her life as something that went wrong. She frames it as something that unfolded. This reframing is not denial. It is integration. Integration allows compassion toward herself, toward others. Compassion no longer requires self-sacrifice. It coexists with boundaries. This balance is rare, but it is achievable, and once experienced, it becomes non-negotiable. The woman will not return to self-abandonment because she knows what it costs, and she knows what alignment offers. Not perfection, but coherence. Coherence is peace, not the absence of conflict, but the absence of inner war. The war has ended, not because the world changed, but because she did. And from this internal shift, life continues to respond. Quietly, precisely, relationally. The dialogue between inner and outer is now conscious. She listens. She responds. And this is where the movement settles, not as an ending, but as a recognition. The woman understands now that nothing was wasted. Not the confusion. Not the guilt. Not the years spent adapting, waiting, surviving. Each stage was a dialogue with the psyche, each struggle a message asking to be heard. Jung reminded us that healing is not about fixing what is broken, but about remembering what was never meant to be lost. Wholeness does not arrive dramatically. It arrives quietly, when inner truth no longer needs to fight for space. When a woman chooses herself, life does not shrink. It deepens. Relationships become clearer. Choices become cleaner. The inner world becomes a place of orientation, not conflict. This is individuation, not perfection, not escape, but conscious participation in one's own life. If this exploration resonated with you, if you felt recognized, challenged, or gently stirred, there is much more to unfold. Subscribe to continue this journey into the deeper psychology of Carl Jung, the feminine psyche, and the quiet power of inner transformation. Stay connected. What seeks expression within you is still unfolding.